Testing 1 2 1 2. Can you hear me? Let me see. Hold on. Testing one
Testing one
two
two
one
one.
two. So about to get back started again. My stream stopped in the middle of the stream last time. I think I understand why. I was using a piece of content from YouTube that may have been a copyright, so I won't be using that in the future. I thought I did enough to go around it because I usually use media like that from YouTube. But maybe something changed and I didn't know. Um, let me see where we were now. One about halfway through. All right, so let's keep the conversation going. I'll drop the link to the first half of this in the email and in the chat, so you have it, or you can go to the page where you're watching this and you can watch the first half of it. And also let me remove my test case here. Give me one sec. Okay, yeah, that really threw me off. That in 20 some classes, that never happened. So it happened this time, but we good. So let's kind of reset. So we were talking about image and black popular culture. We talked about the main archetypes of uh, blackness in media, be it TV, be it film, be it radio. And I was playing an example one, a scene from Bamboozled, Spike Lee film, where Pierre Delacroix, the main character, was pitching this crazy idea to the studio execs, and which eventually got picked up of a minstrel show and kind of outlined what I was talking about. And then at the end of the movie, he put a montage of caricatures from the era that I'm talking about, the minstrel era, that are the archetypes for how blacks are portrayed in media. And it stopped there. So we're gonna pick up back where we should here, talking about the birth of blaxploitation in film, or blaxploitation era in movies. Let's see. And I have another one to show. I'm worried about if I can or if I should. It's a big part of my, the discussion this week was to show those images. Uh, do, 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 do. So the beginnings of blaxploitation. Blaxploitation is an era in the film industry from about 1971 to about 1975 ish, where there was an influx of black themed movies targeted towards black audiences, that above other things had a really good soundtrack, movie soundtrack, had a formula of a strong black male or female lead from a ghetto community that sticks it to the man, and that the hero rides off in the sunset. And it was targeted towards black youth, and it was very successful during its time. Um, let's go a little deeper into that notion. So, growing up, one of my dad's favorite movies was Superfly. I can remember being a kid. He always had it. He always wanted to watch it. That was his movie. And as a kid, I couldn't understand it. We were watching. I love the music was good. It was good. When we were able to watch, he wasn't just sitting us down. I'm born in. I'm an '80s baby, so he wasn't sitting me down and said, "Let's sit down and watch Superfly." But if he had it on, or if he, it was playing, or the video was there, put it in and watch it. So I always knew about it growing up. Um, One of my favorite movies growing up was The Wiz, though that wasn't blaxploitation. It was from that era. And then during my time studying African American studies, went back and watched all the good ones, I'll say. And I have my favorites. A couple of months ago on my Facebook page, when I was just doing some research for the class, I went and was asking people, what's your favorite blaxploitation movies? What do you feel about all this and that? And it started the conversation, and the conversation started to evolve. And so I want to make sure my video is still up here, because last time, yep, so it looked like we good. So I'm talking just to see if it was going to keep going. So, a very interesting thing. So when you get to the early 70s, the movie industry is on a downturn. It put out movies, everybody putting out movies, and they were bombing. When I say bombing, just not doing well. Nobody wants to see none of that stuff with what was going on in the anti-war movement, what was going on in civil rights or Black Power at that time. Nobody really was trying to sit down and watch no movie. They didn't want to see about World War II no more. They didn't want to see no minstrel show. They didn't want to see none of that, and so they were bottoming out. And so, um, still along that same time, there were still creatives creating, there was still things happening, but the movie industry as we knew it wasn't, being able to keep up its end of a deal. It's taking these big loans out from the bank and unable to pay them back. And so you got even banks coming in and taking parts of studios and acquiring them, especially around MGM, who was one of the main provocateurs around Blaxploitation Films. Saying what the heck you gonna do? Well, in 1970, 69, 70, an enterprising gentleman named Melvin Van Peebles, um, you know, tried his hand at music, tried his hand at poetry, really got into make filmmaking through a lot of different avenues. And he produced a film on his own dollar and able to kind of leverage some money from the network that he had, called Sweetback's Badass Song. And in this movie, the main character, Sweetback, just a second here. I have my notes here, but when everything stopped, I accidentally killed it. Here we go. And in the movie Sweetback, Sweetback is an interesting movie. If you've ever seen it, when I first got to EMU, I watched it, and I would anybody who was close to me who I thought I wanted to share something like that, we said and we watched it. Um, so Sweetback is the story of this young boy turned man who at a very young age had a encounter. So he lived in a whorehouse, so he had an encounter with this prostitute that showed him his sexual identity, and in that process found out that he had a sweet back, that he was good at, uh that he had a sweet back. I'll just leave it at that. And through the movie, he becomes, a sexual stud and a reluctant hero. Um, One day he finds a cop beating up a black youth, like a revolutionary black youth, somebody who would have been a member of the Panthers or something. And he basically killed those cops with their handcuffs, like butchered them, which you usually didn't see in a movie during that time. It was a group of bikers that he encountered, like racist redneck bikers. Went back to their lair, sexed down a woman with a sweet back in front of all them folks. And for the rest of the movie, he was perpetually on the run. Now, also in the movie, he ended up, raping somebody at knife point, ran away from his people who was looking to catch him. In a very kind of poignant moments, it was like a call and response. You see Sweetback running, and then you hear "Run, run, motherfucker," and then it's a theme song of the movie. You read my mama, you bled my papa, you won't bleed me. And so, to make a long story short, he does all these things, and the community is helping him along the way. So the preachers help him, the community help him. So he gets away. So he sexed this white woman down in front of these folks, motorcycle club. He kills these cops. He gets away, and then at the end of the movie, he says, they put on the screen, "Watch out, bad niggas coming back to collect some dues." So they called it a revolutionary film. It kind of was the birth of this blaxploitation thing. What made it interesting was it cost him about $500,000 to make, and it earned him $15 million independently. So it just kind of blew the top off of what was possible in making these movies. So while it was a labor of love, art, and work for him, the major studios just saw it as an opportunity to cash in. So the recipe is okay: low funding, high return. That's what we want. Um, and so, this was, it was the first time you ever saw somebody do that in the movie. He did the score as well, and he hired this little band nobody ever heard of before, Earth, Wind, and Fire. I don't know if you ever heard of them, to do the music. And the album was a hit, the movie was a hit, and he went on to, continue moving on. His son, Mario Van Peebles, did stuff like New Jack City, Panther movie 1995, and on and on and on and on. And so this was a very interesting kind of situation. So um this movie went well independently, and I had an interview, a piece to play from when he came to Detroit and talked to this progressive radio station about it, but I'm not going to play that because I don't want my stream stopped. But I will maybe play another one to see if it'll work. So, social and politically, the movies were failing due to white flight. So these urban theaters were downtown in an urban city. White flight was happening. They moved to the suburbs. And so you had people not going to the movies. You had those who were there not wanting to see nothing if it ain't had a minute. And so you saw this situation where this movie was successful. Hollywood is looking for a hit. So they say, okay, we think we can, let's test the pilot. Let's test and see. And so right after that, Shaft was produced. So what's interesting about Shaft was Shaft got they had Gordon Parks directed. They had MGM put it out, and it was a movie that said, let's take away some of the brassness of Sweetback, put the industry around it, and see if it can still work. And so, to make a long story short, Shaft is a story about a private detective that is who don't like the streets. Now, he don't like the cats from the streets, but he's contracted by these gangsters to find his daughter, to find the man's daughter who was taken. And so through the story, and I'm not going to tell you the whole thing, you can sit at home and watch it. He ends up working with these street gangsters to get the daughter back. He used the revolutionaries, or will be the Black Panthers, to help get the woman, to help get the girl back. And during the movie, he kicking butt, got his one-liners, sticking it to the man, and he is lovely with the ladies. He got him a babe, love her down. He got a white girl, love her down. So you're seeing a lot of the things that happen from Sweetback, but happening in a little bit more sanitized way. And also you had the phenomenon of the soundtrack. So they took Sweetback, put it on, like, it's like taking it off of like independent circuit, putting it on mainstream, cleaning it up a little bit, and seeing what you can get out of it. And it was a successful movie. It earned $12 million. It crossed over because they kind of made it a little more palatable for middle audiences, and it also showed that film model worked, but also the soundtrack model worked. That's where you get Isaac Hayes and Shaft. It won an award for best music at the Oscars, and so now you see that there is not only a market, a pilot, but there's a market for this Blaxploitation that can make you some money. So going into it, they're looking like, we want to spend as little as possible, pay as little as possible, tell these dumbass black stories that we don't even want to tell, and get this big return in doing it. So Blaxploitation was birthed out of a situation like that. So for my 80s and 90s people, you know how Fox started with Martin and The Living Color and New York Undercover, then it changed, or how the WB started, or UPN, and all these networks started off the black work. Then you move on to your next thing. So that's what happened in that process. From there, yep. So the formula was, you got a kick-ass black star, you got an inner city ghetto story, you got the black man saves the day, and he rides out and he sticks it to Whitey. Be it, it was a lot early. It was a political kind of a conversation. As it got more and more used, it started to just become more of a lower hanging fruit. I like to connect it to COINTELPRO. So they didn't want. Let me take a step back. COINTELPRO, and we've talked about this in our class along the way. They did not want to see a rise of a black messiah, and they wanted to distract the black youth from seeing political action. So they killed all the leaders. They imprisoned the leaders, and they tried to kill the movement. But at the same time, they put this stuff in the theaters. So instead of wanting to go be Huey P. Newton, you maybe wanted to do something else. And they kind of fed on our want and our need to see different representation in movies. We didn't want to see Sidney Poitier no more. We didn't want to see that. We didn't want to see him kowtowing to the white power structure. We didn't want to see him being an acceptable Negro. We didn't want to see him helping these white folks out and being asexual. We wanted somebody who was a badass, somebody who stuck it to whitey, somebody who did some shit. And so they played on that notion. And then also at that time, the black community was gauging younger. So you put these images in front of these young kids. You don't show them Huey and Bobby, but show them Sweetback, show them Shaft, show them Superfly as we move forward. So to me, it was kind of a effort to kind of do both. Now, also what muddles the water as well is you had these would-be actors and actresses who just needed a chance, who needed a chance to play in something, who wanted to pay their bills, who wanted to be a part of following their dreams and doing this, who may have said, well, I'm willing to play any role if I have to, you know, I just want to play it. So you have all these things coming together. Excuse me. And you have Blaxploitation born, a consumer demand for it, and you got a formula that works. So as you move forward through the process, there were three kind of main stages that I like to call it. And this comes from the Eddie Guerrero Framing Blackness book and a couple other documentaries and reads that I had to kind of define this as well. Let me jump down here to film here. So if anybody's following along, they know where I am. So you had the pilot stage, Cotton Comes to Harlem, Sweetback, and Shaft that kind of established a formula for the genre. Now, I'll just speak to Cotton Comes to Harlem just for a bit. So Cotton Comes to Harlem was a book by Chester Himes, who wrote a book about this detective. And to make a long story short, they was following this bogus preacher who, if you give him this money, he was going to do this and that. And they found out he was running a racket, and they kind of, the two cops solved it. And they were outsmarting their other detectives in the office, and they was able to stick it to those who were harming the black community. If you ever read the book by Chester Himes, Cotton Comes to Harlem, it brings it out. We read that in African American Studies as well. And then so that kind of was the pilot, those three movies. And then you had kind of the rise and the resistance. So you had Superfly, which changed the game. And we'll talk about that in a minute. You went from having a private eye or a detective or a rogue kind of actor to a pimp, or not a pimp, to a drug dealer, which later became a pimp in the Mac. And then you had Coffee with Pam Grier. You had Cleopatra Jones. I forget my sister's name. It's in my notes. I'll pull it up. Foxy Brown and the Mac that came and kind of pushed it to its height. But then you also had a push in the resistance by civil rights organizations saying, man, this shit ain't right. This ain't what we want to see. This ain't it. We want more inclusion, but not this way, and let's get it right. And then you had the fall. The industry was facing a lot of different pushes to not do those kind of films. And then they found films that worked again. You got people back in the movies, and then you start playing other stuff and it moved forward. So those were the three kind of major parts of that. Before I jump there, let's get back to the to some of these notes here. So next in line after Shaft was Superfly, 1972. You know, it muddled the waters between a hero and a villain. So in this movie, you have a cocaine dealer looking to make his last, he wants to get out of the game. So he wants to make his last run to make $1 million. And to do this, he got to outsmart these corrupt cops that's trying to use him. And he gonna stick it to the man and get his money and leave the game. This was a very interesting film because one, aesthetically, you see Ron O'Neal, light-skinned brother, long hair, looking like a pimp, but wasn't one. But I guess he was with the ladies. He's reliable with the ladies, as they say. He, you know, wearing these clothes, looking good, driving this car, running through the ghetto community, selling his dope, being the man. And so it's muddling the waters. This was a political statement at first. Huey P. Newton and the Panthers, they backed Sweetback saying this is a revolutionary film and this is what we should aspire to. Great work. But then you also had those saying this ain't a revolutionary work. Remember Larry Neal we talked about from the Black Aesthetic saying, nah, this shit ain't it. You off, bruh. you on some other stuff. So it had mixed reviews. Shaft the same way, but Shaft went over a lot better. Okay, I like this. Smart brother was still looking out for his community, did his thing. The music was banging great. Well, this one, this was like, man. So his image of the main character, he really took the moviegoers in a direction, and the studios did, that maybe some of the earlier pioneers didn't want. And so it started to become exploitation, showing drug use, showing no love for the ladies, showing ghetto communities and you making your living off the ghetto community, no story, no arc. In real talk, this era birthed the gangster rap of my era, where we learned bitches ain't shit. We learned it from the pimps and the players and the hustlers. The pimps, players, and hustlers that we was listening to as kids was watching these movies in the 70s and repurposed it to us in the 90s, and we ain't know it unless you knew the game. And so his clothes, the first time you saw a brother dressed like that, first time you saw a brother getting money like that, first time you saw the underworld looking very interesting and thought-provoking to young folks watching these movies. You had Curtis Mayfield on the soundtrack. One of my favorite albums is the soundtrack to Superfly. That's I'm your mama, I'm your daddy, I'm that nigga in the alley. That Pusher Man and Child Running Wild, trying to get over, the theme from Shaft. You have Freddy's Dead. You have these hit records that came off of this. And it another platinum record. So you had the success of the Earth, Wind, and Fire with Sweetback. You had the success of the major success of Shaft and Isaac Hayes, and now you have Curtis Mayfield doing his thing. And what was interesting is this will be what we talk about, I guess, next time. This transition from soul music to funk music, and a part of that transition was happening during these Blaxploitation films. And so what's so unique about not the Godfather of Superfly was Godfather came out a little bit before. It was so good and so appealing, and knocked them off the top spot and end up earning $19 million. So at this point, you got a whole thing. But it's not the political stuff that was happening with Sweetback. It's not the sanitized version of the black guy wins and he's helping his community and he's doing this thing with Shaft. Now we're talking about cocaine dealers, doing their last score, looking good, driving good with all the ladies, and you're glorifying this kind of image. So now this is happening. This is the rise. This is when you start seeing all the movies come after it. You start to see athletes. Well, let me take a step back. While this is growing, you have a push from, and I say push, no pun intended, groups like Push by Jesse Jackson and the NAACP from Los Angeles, really giving push back to what this is and what is feeding us. And I am going to play a clip here in a moment by a gentleman from the NAACP Los Angeles, what's his name, Cornelius Griffin, talking about the harms of Blaxploitation in media. So I'm going to play that clip, and hopefully it don't end my stream. And if it does, I'll be back with another link. So I'm going to share my screen like I always do, and hopefully we got a different outcome here.
Association for the Advancement for Colored People.
Mostly everything about today's black movies I object to, because primarily they're part of the most insidious manipulation of behavioral patterns of any ethnic group ever recorded in the history of the movie and the film industry. This is an industry that first depicted all Indians as savages. It depicted all Japanese as Japs, all Chinese as Chinks, and at one time in our history, all Germans as Nazis, and of course all other Orientals as gooks, and now it depicts all blacks as niggers. And we've taken one giant step from Step and Fetch It to super nigger. We have movies that actually are nothing but sophisticated and expensive commercials for cocaine. And I'm speaking of Superfly. I'm speaking of the way they have our women getting in and out of bed without having any kind of emotional involvement with the men concerned. I'm speaking of having pimps, prostitutes, and other assorted criminal types thumbing their nose at law, when those of us who are products of the ghetto know that the first organization, the first governmental agency we run to when we're in trouble is the law enforcement agencies. Now, whether the law enforcement agencies live up to our expectations, that is not important. The one thing, we need them, and we must insist that they serve us as they serve other communities. And we cannot take merely an economic view of blaxploitation. It is a moralistic view. We must do whatever we can to raise the level of consciousness of that consumer community out there that support these movies. We must let them know how they're being exploited. We must let them know how their behavioral patterns are being manipulated. We must let them know how the clothes they wear on the screen cause us to go in and buy clothes. We must let them know that the religious ornaments that our kids are wearing around their necks are indicative that they're on cocaine. We must let them know that the reason our kids aren't being busted for cocaine today, because the sale of it has gone up, is because they're selling magic shave powder and sugar crystals for cocaine, so the narcotics agents can't bust them. These are the things that we should be concerned about. I thought wasn't a bad movie. The second Shaft movie I thought was fairly mediocre. But we cannot entertaining stories that can be romanticized about blacks. We have blacks now who are heroes in the most unpopular and the most unwanted war in the world. What are we going to do about it? We have blacks who have done everything from being involved in blood plasma to making shoes. Hell, we've done everything in this country from pick the cotton to fight in its most unpopular war. Someplace in between, I'm sure, that there can be movies made about the contributions that we have made to this American society.
How do you answer the question?
And I'll stop it there for time's sake. But yeah, so you have people pushing against it. And so you have the actors and actresses like, damn, man, why are you hating? We finally get a chance to play some roles. I finally get a chance to be a professional. And this industry is a baby. Let it grow. It'll grow past that. But then you also have Hollywood saying, well, oh no. So I'm gonna move through it a little bit quicker. So as we started to move through the process, you start to see let's see, where is it here? Here it is. You start to see, more movies need to be made for lower budgets to make the optimal return. So they're not going into it with the best interest. You start to see the studios need more talent. So first place they looked are athletics. Where can we find some handsome, well-built Negroes to play some of these ass-kicking roles? So Jim Brown, in 1,000 Rifles, Rosie Greer, football player, played next to Daniel Boone. You have to also find some new leading ladies. So you found Gloria Hendry, who was a former Playboy bunny who played Cleopatra Brown. You found Pam Grier as well. And so the industry is bumping. And also, at this point, and I want to go a little more, but I'm moving a little faster for time's sake. Motown, I always got to make it about Motown, got into the mix too. So Trouble Man, 1972, Marvin Gaye did the soundtrack. The Map, 1973, Willie Hutch did the soundtrack. Two of my favorite blaxploitation soundtracks that you can find, along with Sweetback, along with Shaft, along with Superfly, so they were knocking them out. And so, again, the formula was a strong black man or woman who wins the fight, a desirable lover. We're going to have some fine one-liners to say, take that, honky, something like that. You're going to have the sex scene that's similar to some softcore porn that was happening at the time, because when Melvin Van Peebles got involved, he was involved in some of that. So he made the sex scenes a little more sexy. So that became a norm in the film. Even Shaft was knocking them down. Also, you had to have an interracial scene. So it had to be something where some white woman or some Mexican or somebody, some Latino, something was getting into bed with these big old black brothers outside of the sisters. You also had, as it changed, you start to see the industry kind of move forward and a new characters emerge, like on Superfly, street smart pimps and prostitutes who was looking to off the man or the honky or the establishment or whitey. Our hero had to fight against. It started to go in different kind of genres. Black Belt Jones, it started getting to Kung Fu. You started to see the marketing kind of move forward with colorful posters. Urban radio, they would put the ads on radio on the trailers. Adolf Caesar would be like, Black Sam is coming. You don't want to find him. He gonna knock you out. He's a lot wonderful with the ladies. He's proud in the ghetto. And Mr. Black is coming to get your ass. Something like that. That's what you go, get from the trailers. So movies started rolling out. Black Caesar with Fred the Hammer Williamson. Cotton Comes to Harlem. We talked about that. Cleopatra Jones. Three the Hard Way. Hell Up in Harlem. Second of the Harlem, the Black Caesar series. So you had after decades of one stereotype of the Sidney Poitier acceptable Negro, you're starting to see people being able to play the other one. This big brass kind of, remember we talked about the undesirables, the one who was a masculine sex addict. You start to see that on both sides. So you start to see that happening. Let's see. They kept rolling out. So after the Mac, which really changed the game, Goldie, Richard Pryor was in the movie where the center point was a pimp trying to outsmart these corrupt cops. I just watched it the other day. But you have pimping in the place, pimps and hoes in the place now. Drugs. Long gone are the days of a Sweetback or a Shaft, so to speak. And then you even started to see it kind of move over into James Bond. James Bond, Live and Let Die, was a Blaxploitation film with a black woman as his co-lead, and they make love, and it's changing the game. But the reality was that despite the success of Blaxploitation films, it was still seen as the stepchild of the industry with slim budgets, quick call times, poor scripts, sometimes no rehearsals, no wardrobe, no makeup. The director had contempt for his audience and thought it was trash and didn't care about quality at all. Like we saw earlier, civil rights group was calling for writers, filmmakers, and more quality to the products. And so, it was tough for people to kind of stomach it. But among the young generation, this is all they knew. This is what they want to see. They want to see action movies. If I want to go get righteous, I'm going to go see the Black Panthers. If I want to go get righteous, I'm going to go see NAACP. If I want to get righteous, I'm going to go to church. I'm just trying to have some fun, watch Soul Train, watch this, and have a good time. And so it was really starting to muck the waters. And I attribute a lot of that to the COINTELPRO as well. So the industry, I'm gonna just move forward. The industry started to die. Well, before I say that, they even started bringing the sisters in the mix. So Pam Grier, Miss Hendry that we talked about was starting to get into the mix, bringing Black women to the forefront. Now, of course, they had to play that Sapphire or that Jezebel. Now, they wasn't gonna do it on their own, even though they could, but they had to play those roles. They had to kind of maneuver in that way. And later on, as we started getting to the mid to the late 70s, those actresses were saying, we don't even want to play that no more. I'm trying to do something different. You had me all wrong, and that ain't what I want to do. Movies start to just be all sex and violence, no other themes, no creativity. So if you've seen one, you've seen the next. With them saying, niggas will see anything. They don't care nothing about it. NACP came out again saying we don't want to see this. The movies became depoliticized, and they kind of moved in another direction. But on the flip side, as this push from civil rights organizations and other directors and writers, you saw other movies as well. You saw stuff like Claudine, which was a very sanitized version of Blaxploitation, but still talked about some of the issues of welfare and helping in the family, and how it hurt the Black family with James Earl Jones, Cornbread Earl and Me, Cooley High, which was the first kind of teenage drama. It was in the 70s, but played the late 60s teenage drama, and kind of brought that to life. So it was kind of saying, okay, well, Blaxploitation ain't the only thing that can sell, and we can do some other things as well. Around the same time, Hollywood found its stride. Movies like Jaws, Star Wars, Rocky began to come out, and they started to say, well, we don't need to do this Blaxploitation no more. So they did two things. One, killed Blaxploitation to a certain extent, or to a full extent, and co-opted some of the stars. Well, I could take a star, instead of making a Black movie, I'll just take him, put him in a white movie, everybody will come see it. Billy D. Williams in Star Wars, right? It's crazy, right? Crazy. And so the big box office black token star became a thing, and the full cast of black movies from the black perspective, if you want to call it that, kind of ended. During that time, and we'll get back here, over $50 million in studio receipts, over 100 soundtracks, over 200 films produced. Black audience's share was about 75%. And it's actually over 200 movies. And music, fashion, culture moved forward. It was another clip I wanted to show of Gordon Parks talking, but I don't want to lose my stream, kind of defending Blaxploitation, and another one of Melvin Van Peebles talking more about Blaxploitation and Sweetback's impact and how it changed. But I'm not going to play that because I don't want to lose my stream. TV. Now, I'm going to be real quick with this because that lapse really made us lose some time. It was a similar kind of arc for black folks on TV. It was a very tough from 30s and 40s or 40s and 50s when TV came into play. Those same archetypes and stereotypes that we talked about were still in place. The 70s was a time where you saw an explosion in black sitcoms. So we're talking about the Jeffersons. We're talking about Good Times. We're talking about Sanford and Son. We're talking about What's Happening. We're talking about I was gonna say The Roots. Shout out to Questlove. Talking about Roots. Talking about Soul Train. Talking about black political TV. But what I'll say here for this, because we don't have a lot of time left, the gentleman named Norman Lear, who was responsible for these shows, had a very contentious, well, I'll say this, a very mixed kind of result with his creation, in that he was known for being a progressive, in that he brought these black families to the TV screen. The middle class Jeffersons, who was a spinoff of Charlie Bunker, the black Charlie Bunker, where you had George able to call white folks honky on TV. I called somebody that at school growing up. I'm so glad I didn't get caught, and I didn't understand the impact of what it was. But I would say honky, 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 honky because I heard him say it, and you got a chance to see a upper middle class family navigate, what happened with an interracial couple and a maid and a doorman and his grandmama and his mama there, and all what comes with that. You got a chance to see Good Times, which was a black ghetto family in Cabrini Green projects in Chicago, and all that they went through with a strong black man as their father. But if you go back and you look at the writers of these shows, when there were black faces there, they weren't saying they were as proud of the work as some of the producers and people who put it on TV. So, to us, it was our lineage, our heritage, stuff that we lived with and we watched, especially in syndication. For me, I'm an 80s baby. So this came on, we could watch. If you know that, I'm talking about the Jeffersons, or keeping your head above water, making a way if you can, temporary layoffs, that kind of deal. But I do remember, episodes like the Black Jesus episode when Florida didn't like it, or when James found all that bread and they was gonna be able to move out the ghetto, and Florida said, we don't want to do that. When Penny got the child abuse and had the iron on her, or when JJ got shot, or just all these moments that were, meant a lot to us, but still kept the caricatures and archetypes that I talked about earlier kind of in play. We're on TV. And then also Roots that went on to be a success, the highest rated miniseries on TV in America. The highest rated miniseries over 8 nights that ever came out was one about slavery. Like Umar would say, don't that sound suspicious? Don't that sound suspicious? Of course it was. We wanted to see it because we wanted to see kind of that arc of what our ancestors went through, but of course they want to see it because they want to see themselves in charge. And then we have Soul Train. We'll talk about that next week as we talk about the music a lot more in depth. Don Cornelius, he'll be one of our Black Power Defined for next week. You also had children's programming during that time. Hey, it's Fat Albert. Every year I get my kids to watch the Christmas one at least. And then the Jackson 5 show, they were pop stars during that time. So it's a black show, but it was really meant for audiences mixed. And then more in line with our what we've been talking about, you had public affairs television on TV. You had Black Journal, you had Say Brother, you had Soul, that was showing everybody we've been talking about, our heroes, Huey P. and Stokely Carmichael and Angela Davis. They had these folks on there having political debates, talking about where they stood. That clip I showed a couple of weeks ago from the Black political convention, that was on one of these networks. So, you know, you had a lot of Black folks on TV during this time, more than we've ever seen. Some good, some bad, but still our questions around ownership and opportunity were, you know, still in question. So we know that the cultural impact, the economic, educational impact of Black music, of Blacks on TV was very interesting. And I want to keep us with this, and I'm going to end it here, and we'll talk Black music next week. Still questions prevail or persist over our image and ownership of our image and how we leverage those images. The economic opportunity of those who are playing those images was still in play, to where you could say, well, actors who always wanted to be on TV, who always wanted to play a role, who always wanted to be a part of that, part of it, had a chance to do that. But you always know that those archetypes are always going to be a part of the progress. So from minstrel shows to Blaxploitation to hit sitcoms of the 70s, our role and our image and culture is always going to be in question. And there's going to be questions around, should it be entertainment and funny and those things, or should it show a greater representation? Who owns those images and why, you know, and how and why we do that. We even still see that around Tyler Perry today, around Lee Daniels when he had Empire, around the sister Shonda Rhimes, who cooked up what's Kerry Washington and the president and all them. I can't even think about it because I'm moving too fast. Empire show and even Issa and some of the stuff she was doing. Even today with if you watch Abbott Elementary, I guarantee you see every last one of those archetypes in those characters. That's just TV. So in a nutshell, that's what, you know, image around Black liberation looks like during this time. Next week, we're going to be talking Black businesses. So we're going to be spending a lot of time having a discussion around how Black businesses functioned and flourished during the 1970s. We'll bring back Richard Nixon and some of his policies that helped Black businesses move forward or try to string out Black businesses, and however that was going to look. We'll look at people like Barry Gordy. We'll look at people like John H. Johnson with his magazine empire, Black Enterprise magazine, and Graves. How people were using Soul Train not only to dance, but the business that came from it and the advertising that came off it, etc. So next week we'll talk Black business. In 2 weeks, we'll get back to looking at more of Black liberation around affirmative action, the fight for school segregation, and the continued fight for civil rights post-Nixon. We'll be talking about the Watergate scandal. We talked about that. We'll talk about the Church Committee, which was the committee that came together to put in it to figure out what was going on during COINTELPRO and show kind of the severity of that. And then we'll end our last one with just doing a quick summary or doing a summary of everything that we covered in the class. So I want to thank you, even though we had some technical difficulties today. It's 2 parts to this one. So if you go to the YouTube page, you're going to see 2 parts. It stopped because I think I placed some images that I shouldn't have, or some media that I shouldn't. And I won't do that in the future. That's why I didn't show any of the other media we have moving forward. And we're storming through this class. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your attention. And I'll catch you next week. AAS 477. Dwayne Barnes, MPA out, and I will see you next time around. Peace.